So I'm going to do some hand sewing. You can go ahead and do the sewing you're working on. And I was thinking about something the other day, and I know a lot of you are with me on this, but I have somewhat of an obsession. I'm not an obsessive person, but I do have somewhat of an obsession about scraps. I love using up scraps. That's how I started sewing, was with my mom and her scrap box. It was a box, it was a cardboard box, and it was in the basement. And when it was always a very good day when we got to go down to her the basement and into her box and pick out some stuff to sew on. And she started us with hand sewing, just kind of like the stuff we're doing now, really basic. And then she also eventually started teaching us to use the sewing machine when we got older. And she was good to wait till we were older because once we started, she never got her sewing machine back. It was we would I know I was on it constantly, and my sisters were too. And she taught us how to sew clothes, and immediately, almost immediately, not almost, probably like when I was 15, how to quilt. Okay, I found one I like. What do you think? This is my next piece. Yeah. Okay. And so I always loved scraps, and we loved going through them and sorting them. But now that I'm a quilter, and that was many years ago, and now I'm a quilter, and as you know, the minute you start quilting, you start collecting scraps, whether you like it or not. And a lot of people don't like it, but I love it, and I love being able to use those scraps. So I have done a lot of scrap quilts, and I love them. Learning how to go from just completely random, everything in, truly scrap, to then getting a little more coordinated, like maybe using all my green scraps or all my blue scraps with like a white background. That's what I like to do now, nice and crisp. But what I find is the more that I work on scraps, the question is, how small before you throw it away? And one of the reasons I love this type of a project is because I am throwing almost nothing away. I mean, I can put on really small, especially because I am doing this by hand. And by the way, if you wanted to do something like this with machine, when you lay the next piece over, you can sew it with a machine. You don't have to do this by hand, but I love threads too, so that's why it makes me crazy that I just love using threads. Okay, so, and I love combing through these and figuring out what's next. But so sometimes what happens is that obsession kicks in, and suddenly I'm not throwing anything away. But that's okay. What it means though is that you have to sew a lot to get rid of your scraps, because you know your scraps are always adding up, and they go a long way. There's probably enough in this bag to make like a whole quilt. You wouldn't think so, but it's amazing, because as soon as you start using scraps, I swear, and I know it doesn't make sense, but a lot of you can attest to this, they grow by themselves. The more you use them, the more they seem to grow. Now this is a really small piece, but I'm gonna go ahead and use it because that's fun. See what I mean? So I'm like, throw that away. No, I can use that. It's tiny, but this type of sewing, it's what draws me to this type of thing to begin with, is because I can use it. And I'll show you here what I do with my needle. You see there? I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stitch right down the middle of that. Because maybe a little higher. Actually, I'll stitch a little higher because I gotta have room to put the next one. But it doesn't matter how small it is because I don't have to factor in seams that much. So I can just really use everything. The other thing that draws me to this type of sewing is I've always loved handwork. I know a lot of you don't like handwork, but it's okay. It's okay. You don't ever have to do it, but some of you like it. Some of you want to learn more about it, and some of you do a lot of it. And the movement that's going right now is they're calling it slow stitch. So this would actually technically be called slow stitch right now, but it's hand sewing. It's hand embroidery. It's on there, no problem. There's another thing I really like about this type of project, any scraps, is that I love to, it's that obsessive, I want to use everything up. I don't want to throw anything away, which also feeds into, you know, the environment, which is a good thing. The less we throw away, the better. And so if I can use up these scraps instead of throwing them away, that's good for the environment. And I'm all for that, as we all are, of course. So I can fool myself into saying, you don't have to throw this out yet. You can keep using it. As long as I can find more projects that I can use the scraps on, you know, I mean, I can do a whole quilt with this if I want it. But it is fun that they call it slow stitch, because, I mean, that is what it is. You're stitching very slowly. You can take your time. You can play with your fabrics. I mean, really, that's what we do this for. We love fabrics. We love petting fabric in a fabric store. And don't tell me you don't, because I know you do. We all do. We love to feel it, because feeling it is a big part of, you know, picking out fabrics and what's going to work for you. But really, we just love to just run our hands on it. Oh, as soon as you see something beautiful, you put your hand on it. And, you know, you can't help yourself. And so that's, again, why the slow stitching is really nice. You can take your time. I don't have to be accurate. If I'm tired, it doesn't matter. I can just stitch, stitch, stitch. It doesn't have to be straight. Nothing's ever going to have to be taken out. And no, you cannot fail at this. So, now I know that not every personality is attracted to this type of work, because I have a strong belief that there's two types of brains that come to quilting. And some of us are love the precision and love to have love the matching and love the corners that all and seams that nest together and things like that. And then some of us are more about, I don't want to have to worry about all those. I just want to sew. It just feels good to like design more stuff, create more things, make. Well, that'll be fun. This is a fun one. And I'm more on that side. I'm not a precision, although I often tell the story that my one of my best friends is definitely a precision person, and she and I have been sewing together for a very long time, and that's when I realized she is how I have learned that the two types of characters have to have it that way. You know, it's not that, like I used to think, you know, people who need to be real precise, oh, you don't need to be that precise. Just draw it on. Just sew it. Just do the freehand. But I realize now by knowing my friend is that it causes a lot of anxiety, which never occurred to me until I became, you know, older, because we've been sewing together since we were in our 20s, and just knowing her long enough and knowing she can't, she does not enjoy doing like a random scrap quilt. That is not her thing. She doesn't like it, and she keeps making herself, when I'm not so we were working on a scrap quilt, and she's like, I want to do random stuff like you do. I'm like, okay. And I said, put all your squares in a bag, and then you're just gonna put your paper bag that you can't see in, and you're just gonna pull out the next one. Whatever is next goes into the quilt right now. You're not gonna worry about, you know, did you already do a brown one? Is this two brown ones together? You're not even going to worry, is it the same fabric? You're not going to worry about anything. Because I knew she wasn't going to draw the same fabric. But she did it for about maybe 10 minutes. And and it was driving her crazy. She was trying really hard. She was just like, but she did it, and then she keeps saying, but look, this is the next one. Do you think that's good? I'm like, yes, that's good. It'll all look great when you put it all together. But she had to stop doing random because it drove her too crazy. And I mean, I didn't mean to frustrate her, but I didn't really think it would frustrate her that much, but it did. So, like I said, this type of project really feeds my personality because I'm much more whatever, let it flow, it's okay. The corners didn't match, well, you know. And I thoroughly believe there's nothing wrong with that. I am the type of quilter that I don't care if it's every it's done. It doesn't have to be perfect. And not only that, but then I start going on to the point where I'd like it better if it's not perfect. And it took a long time to actually realize that too. Like, okay, you know why I don't have like the super pretty studio behind me is because if it's all pretty, and I love to see them when I'm watching YouTube videos, I love like, oh, what a gorgeous room they have. It's all perfectly, the colors are good and clean and nice. But if I do that, I can't actually work in the room because it's just too, it is stifling. I don't realize it, but that is what it is it's just kind of uncomfortable. I don't know why. And then I realized, oh, my rooms are always messy, not really because I'm lazy, although I'm not lazy. I just always figure I'd rather sew than clean. But it's more than that. Okay, this one I'm actually gonna throw away. It's a little thin. I'll regret this later. I know I will, but out it goes. But I am using this one. So it's just all it means is you got to know who you are, and quilting will show you who you are, and quilting with others will show you who you are, and it's fun. It's very interesting. Now I just thought about this. I did not put a back on this, but you know what? It's gonna be okay. So see there again, right away, my friend would say, oh, I forgot to put it back. I gotta go put it back. But I'm thinking, okay, I'm this far already and I didn't put it back. It's gonna be inside. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. It's just a pin cushion. So yeah, it's gonna be fine. So then the scraps and loving scraps also folds into what the other thing that's really fun and people are doing a lot of videos on, and that is upcycling. I am fascinated with upcycling. I can't, I don't do as much of it, but I've been doing a little bit more lately and I do love it. So I went to Goodwill thrift store a couple of weeks ago, and I was fabric shopping at Goodwill, and then it was amazing because I'm doing a quilt that has this technique in it, and at some point I'll show you, but it's big. This technique in it with all, it's all gonna be like light blue gray, blue white, blue shirting. So so I'm using like pillowcases and sheets and all these things, and I just wanted to try it out. Number one, it feeds my soul because again, it just feels good to be using this up that will eventually be put in. A lot of the stuff at thrift shops are eventually put in the landfills, and so I feel so good about rescuing these pieces, using them and continuing to use them so that they have a much longer life cycle. But again, it's more than just environmental. It's again more of an obsession. So I know I'm going to be doing more of that. So I've been looking at like a lot of the videos where people will make the quilts of shirts. Shirts, love it. And this is the same kind of thing. But it's and it is, if you do it right, it can be a lot cheaper, and you get some really cool fabrics, really. But you have to kind of open up your mind about the types of fabrics you're using for a quilt. And some people, they don't want to do that. They want to use certain types of the cotton fabrics, and really good. I get it, absolutely. Me too. But this is also very interesting to try out as well. Now, if you've done, some of you I know are nodding your head because you've already done some of these things. And so if you have, put them in the comments below. I would love to see some of the things you're working on that are upcycled, or using up all your scraps, because I love a good idea. And I'm always, now that we have the internet, we can always look for good ideas. Oh my God, Pinterest is amazing. I mean, those of us who remember, what did we do before this all started happening? We were so sheltered. We were so, we only could pick from the patterns in magazines. I remember getting a magazine, the first time I got a magazine, quilting magazine. I was a teenager, and I bought my own magazine, and I was very proud about that. And I took a long time to choose which one I would buy, because I wanted to sew. I was going to sew every quilt in that magazine. Yeah. Well, now I didn't, but I didn't know that at the time, because there's just so much. But that was how there weren't a lot of patterns that you could buy, like in packages and things. And some of the specialty shops, but there were not many specialty shops. I mean, I was in East Lansing when I was a teenager. There was one, and it was a brand new shop, and it was owned by Pepper Corey. And we went in her shop, and she had, all calicos. Now, back then, you would go to the fabric store, and you go to the section that has the calicos. First of all they had all we used back then in the 80s, early, mid 80s, was calico. They were starting to make it just for quilters. Before that, there was this period of time where nobody was doing quilts, really. It wasn't the thing that was hot, and so there weren't, you just used whatever fabric you found, and if it was cotton, great. If it wasn't, in the 70s you see a lot of quilts that are done with funky fabrics, but that's one of the reasons why. One of the reasons why is because that is what they had. And so those people who wanted to quilt, that is what you used. So you used corduroy, and and it's cool. I mean, you see these now and you think, wow, how did they, they were so free with the types of fabrics they used. And the truth is, they had to use what was on hand. Oh, I've got one more piece to put on here for this stage of my pincushion fabric. Okay. And when I went into Pepper Corey's quilt shop, it was in a building, like you had to know it was there to find it, because it was upstairs. It was a charming old building. It was upstairs, and you'd walk in. It was tiny, and but we loved it. And it was all calicos and and solids. And I remember picking up a quilting template, which at that time they were making them. They were kind of a new thing. Well, I don't know if they were a new thing or not, because I was new to it back then, but they were made of paper. I think you could still see those around from time to time, now, but now they're all made, templates are made of plastic, and that's for the quilt, the designs for the quilting on top, because everybody did by hand, and which was fine with me because I loved it. But I was amazed, like, this is a paper template that you can draw your design over and over, which everybody was working in just squares, so all the templates were square, or they were border, kind of still like they are today, but we always worked in squares then, so your template was going to fit on every block of your quilt. and you always left like every other one blank, and so it was going to really showcase on that piece. So tell me if you remember some of these things. Tell me when was the first time if you've been quilting for more than a year. Anyway, not even a year. Tell me what's your first quilt shop you've ever been into, and what was your thoughts when you went in. Okay, so I've done this. Thank you for joining me while I was quilting. The next step I'm going to be doing is I am going to be now, you can see, I'm now going to be quilting all the way across. So I'm going to now go like every, fill in all the spaces. So like every, not 1/4 inch, but you know, somewhere between 1/4 and a half, what would that be? 1/3 of an inch? I'm going to fill this in so it's all straight across. And I'm going to show you something that, just because we're here, that is what I did here. You can see two things. I started out by doing lines across. Now these kind of, they didn't contrast as much. Here we go. And then I realized I want more, so I turned it this way. And then I did lines across this way. You can see those more for some reason. But I also, you know, added a little more color in it. So you get so many different, you know, design elements that you get to decide on the fly, which is what I love. I don't have to plan it. So if you like that kind of thing, you're gonna like this type of quilting. So they call this, I think technically they would call this Canta? No, Canta has seams in it. It's just raw edge. I guess I don't know if there's a name for it yet. Tell me if you know what the name is, but it's all raw edge and then hand sewing. So, great way to use up your scraps. Thanks for joining me.